This hearing will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the Research and Science Education Subcommittee hearing on a systems approach to improving science, technology, engineering, and math education, commonly called STEM Ed. This is the third STEM-related hearing that the subcommittee has held this year, a fact that reflects both the national importance of the STEM fields and also complexity of STEM education reform. The Science and Technology Committee, and our subcommittee in particular, have made STEM Ed a priority. In hearings and reports, we've repeatedly heard that innovation is key to maintaining a high standard of living for all Americans, and that we need more teachers and more graduates in the STEM fields if we want our country to continue to lead in a global economy. Unfortunately, American students have been lagging their international peers, while American businesses are warning about a wave of retirements without adequately trained young people to fill these vacated positions, especially in engineering fields. But we know that there's no panacea, and no one entity can solve this alone, as recent reports from the National Science Board and the Institute for Advanced Study have made clear. Reform of our STEM education system require coordination on multiple fronts across many diverse stakeholders. In addition to several federal agencies, there are state and local governments, school districts, universities, nonprofits, businesses, community organizations, teachers, students, and if a child is fortunate, their parents. I don't doubt that some high-level planning and coordination will be helpful, including in the movement toward common core standards in which almost all states are now engaged. The Science and Technology Committee has begun addressing coordination issues at the federal level, notably through the STEM Education Coordination Bill of 2009. But federal issues and even standards are only the tip of the iceberg. Implementation of any reform has to happen in the 50 states and even more the 15,000 school districts across the country. Today, we will focus on one school district, the city of Chicago, which is the third largest district in the country. The witnesses represent a range of key stakeholder groups in the city of Chicago, including the school district, a large company dependent on highly trained STEM workforce, a local university that has been a leader in K-12 reform, a citywide informal education provider, and a federal agency that has funded many of the innovative programs we will learn about today. Chicago's diverse population of over 400,000 public school students, its top-notch universities, and a commitment of local industry, the school system, the city, and city leaders such as Mrs. Daley, making that ideal case for understanding what works in improving STEM Ed, how various stakeholders in the system can work together, and what can be done at the federal level to encourage best practices across the country. This hearing will consider the entirety of the STEM Ed system, with all of its partners and key leverage points. I look forward to hearing our witnesses shed some light on how we can approach systemic reform more methodically, including through strong partnerships, innovative approaches to in-school and out-of-school teaching, and rigorous assessment of old and new programs alike. America needs to be successful in improving STEM education, and there's no question about that. Without it, we will lose our capacity for innovation and diminish our country's economic strength and competitiveness in the international marketplace. I am confident that Americans can do it, and we can maintain our world leadership. We see some pockets of success across the country. It is our job here in Washington as national leaders to make sure that we learn from the successes and that the best possible information and tools are available to all STEM educators. And that's why you are here today. I want to hear from all of our witnesses about their insights about what has worked in Chicago. And I want to thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today, taking the time, and very hopeful that this will be a great opportunity for people across the country to learn about what you've done, what has worked, and what has not worked, but the best way that we can all move forward for the sake of our country and our future. And with that, I will recognize Ranking Member Dr. Eilers for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to participate in this. As you know, STEM education has a strong place in my heart, and I've spent many hours on it, both as my professional career before coming here and also since I've come here. Today's hearing will examine how the various public and private stakeholders in an urban K-12 system can work in concert to improve science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, better known as STEM education. In particular, I'm pleased that we will hear testimony from key players in the Chicago Public Schools, our nation's third largest school system, on the successes and challenges of implementing STEM education programs in an urban district. As we take a closer look at the Chicago Public Schools, I expect we will gain a greater appreciation for the difficulties involved in encouraging our urban youth to pursue STEM-related fields. At the same time, I look forward to hearing about the role of outside groups in facilitating this type of learning. During the 110th Congress, this committee held a field hearing in Texarkana, Texas, to witness firsthand a suburban community's efforts to engage students in math and science. I expect today's case study of the Chicago Public School System will offer the committee fresh insights while building upon the observations collected in last year's hearing. I would like to acknowledge the work of Chairman Gordon and Subcommittee Chairman Lipinski and their staff on this series of STEM-related hearings in the 111th Congress. These hearings have educated members and the public about the problems and the necessity of improving STEM education, a topic which I am always willing to discuss. I would also like to thank our panel of experts for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing their testimonies. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Eilers, and having an engineer up here and a physicist, certainly we have a little bit of experience, although mine pales in comparison to Dr. Eilers in STEM ed. At this point, if there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statement will be added to the record at this point of the record. So right now I want to introduce our witnesses. First, we have Dr. Wanda Ward, who is Acting Assistant Director for Education and Human Resources at the National Science Foundation. And we have Mrs. Maggie Daley, who is the Chair of After School Matters, which is a unique partnership between Chicago Public Schools, civic leaders, and industries that have created a network of programs, including STEM ed mentorships for teens in Chicago's underserved communities. I'll now recognize Dr. Eilers to introduce our third witness. Actually, I think we're a little, now I look at this, I'm a little mixed up because I don't have in my, but am I in the correct one? You're going to, Mr. Lach? Okay, yeah. There you go.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Lach. He worked in my office for a year as an Einstein Fellow, which gives you some idea of his mental capacity. It was, as you know, the Einstein Fellowships are from the Department of Energy, and they do an excellent job for us. But Michael ended up in my office, and I still recall asking him, after we'd agreed to take him on board, and I was chatting with him, I said, I've only met one person before in my life who was named Lach, and he was a physicist at Berkeley when I was there. We actually shared an office together. It turned out to be Michael's father. But Mike did a great job in my office, one of the few interns or assistants I've ever had who instinctively understood politics. And I suspect that accounts for his success in Chicago, because in Chicago it's very hard to do anything without understanding the politics of Chicago. But Mike did a great job there, and did a great job in our office too, and he's steadily advanced up the ranks in Chicago. I think it's especially appropriate to look at the Chicago public school system not just because of the work that Michael has done, but also because our current Secretary of Education was the leader of the Chicago schools for a few years, and he has already made his mark on the Department of Education and showing great innovation and leadership in that department. So we're looking forward to good things from him there, and we're looking forward to good things from Mike today. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Well, you talk about the politics of Chicago. Dr. Eilers, you were a professor for how many years?
Oh, 22 years.
And at my short time is my 4 years as an assistant professor. I know the politics of in higher education might be worse than anything more difficult than anything I've seen anywhere. So we could probably go on for a long time, but we'll get back to introducing the witnesses here. Dr. Donald Wink is the Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Department of Chemistry and the Director of Graduate Studies in the Learning Sciences Research Institute at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And finally, Ms. Katherine Pickus is the Divisional Vice President for Global Citizenship and Policy at Abbott Labs. As our witnesses know, you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. When you've all completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions, and each member of the panel will have 5 minutes to ask questions. So we will start with Dr. Ward. So Dr. Ward, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Lipinski, Ranking Member Eilers, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Research and Science Education, thank you for inviting me to participate in this hearing on systemic change for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. The National Science Foundation recognizes that STEM education is at a crossroad, in need of increased attention from a broad array of stakeholders who have the common goal of promoting excellence for all learners. Over many decades, we've seen improvements in science attainment through our systemic approach to education reform. The lessons learned and the research findings on K-12 education in formal and informal settings have been synthesized in 2 recent publications by the National Academy of Science, Taking Science to School and Learning Science in Informal Environments. NSF programs are built around many of the conclusions reached in these research publications, such as children entering school already have substantial knowledge of the natural world. What children are capable of at a particular age is the result of a complex interplay among maturation, experience, and instruction. Students learn science by actively engaging in the practices of science. A range of instructional approaches is necessary as part of a full development of science proficiency. Ask and answer questions and evaluate evidence when doing science, and have learners develop positive views of themselves with respect to science. Partnering with other external stakeholders, NSF believes that the field is ready to advance current understanding of STEM education by linking novel approaches and best effective practices to STEM-specific challenges for the 21st century. Our vision will be aligned with the STEM priorities in the America Competes Act, as well as the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. With multi-purpose strategic thinking, we will sharpen our support on 4 foci: innovation in learning ecosystems of emerging areas like clean alternative energy and climate change education, with an emphasis on blending formal and informal education. Broadening participation to improve workforce development, enrichment of teacher education for the 21st century, and fostering cyber learning to enhance STEM education. Recognizing that innovation plays a key role in the U.S. economic competitiveness, the role of diverse intellectual capital in spurring innovation is a great topic of interest to us at the NSF. Key issues within this ecosystem include research and understanding of the culture of innovation and the interplay between innovation and education. Technology has the potential to transform education throughout a lifetime enabling customized interaction with diverse learning materials on any topic, and supporting continuous education at any age. In the last decade, the design of technologies and our understanding of how people learn have evolved together. NSF has played a key role in these advances. NSF can continue to lead this revolution by leveraging its investments in the productive intersections between technology and the learning sciences. Creative thinking in an integrated approach about STEM education and learning for the future will offer new challenges and new opportunities for transformative research on educational practices and learning tools. In summary, our STEM education and workforce development vision will attend to a rich tapestry of excellence and diversity in STEM attainment, access, availability, and reach across STEM lines of inquiry and geographical borders, innovation and transformation for stimulating STEM creativity for discovery and learning, depth and breadth of domains to promote STEM interdisciplinarity, and seamlessness and coherence to ensure a high level of continuity across the learning continuum. STEM education and workforce for the 21st century is key to promoting and sustaining an innovative society. Thank you very much, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. Chair, now recognize Ms. Maggie Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Dr. Eilers, for this opportunity to appear before you this morning. I am Maggie Daley, Chair of After School Matters, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to providing informal educational opportunities, including STEM learning, to Chicago teens. I would also like to introduce David Zinsky, our Executive Director of After School Matters, and I may consult with him from time to time during my testimony. As you may already know, Education Week has reported that 75% of the Nobel Prize winners in the sciences report that their passion for science was first sparked in informal environments. The National Research Council stated in a recent report, there is mounting evidence that structured non-school science programs can feed or stimulate the science-specific interest of adults and children, may positively influence academic achievement for students, and may expand participants' sense of future science career options. After School Matters is one of the largest organizations serving teens during the out-of-school hours in the United States, and last year we provided 30,000 program slots to Chicago teens. Today, I'd like to speak about our organization's efforts and how, with the appropriate support and resources, we can realize our ambitious vision for STEM programming in the future. Allow me to tell you more about who we are and what we do. In 1991, Gallery 37 was established, an art-based summer apprenticeship program for high school teens on an undeveloped parcel of land named Block 37 in downtown Chicago. In the year 2000, key funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation aimed at promoting healthy development of our youth by scaling up quality programs allowed the successful apprenticeship structure of Gallery 37 to be applied to programs in other disciplines and the creation of After School Matters. After School Matters is an intermediary organization that engages hundreds of paid instructors from informal education community to work with thousands of teens in our programs. These instructors create and submit their curricula through a request for proposals process that promotes creativity and diversity in the programs we offer, and it allows us to be intentional when addressing workforce trends. Teens in Tech 37, our technology programs, work with industry professionals on authentic projects in areas such as web design, manufacturing, engineering, media production, and computers. Our programs enable skill building through hands-on activities that spark teens' interests in technology. Our robotics program, funded by the Motorola Foundation, are an example of the success of Tech 37 in each program. Robotics teams design and build robots to compete in 2 unique sporting events. Additionally, Motorola helped us to secure engineering mentors to support these teens. Recognizing that more teens must be exposed to informal science opportunities if we are to maintain global competitiveness, Abbott partnered with us in the year 2006 to create Science 37. These programs provide connections with the city's growing science sectors, and teens develop a new appreciation for science and an awareness of potential science careers. Lab 101 is the Science 37 program created in partnership with Abbott and Dr. Don Wink of the University of Illinois in Chicago. It introduces teens to laboratory procedures and techniques, and teens visit Abbott's facilities to learn about the science and business of global health care. After School Matters brokered a partnership between Abbott and the Chicago Public Schools to renovate a laboratory at Foreman High School, site of the Lab 101 programs. When it opens this fall, the lab will be used for Lab 101 after school and normal classes during the school day. Such collaboration demonstrates the strength of our partnership with the Chicago Public Schools. We want to complement and reinforce the STEM concepts and state standards that are delivered in the high school classroom. One illustration of the relationship between after-school matters and the school day learning is found in the following statistics from the Chicago Public School Department of Career and College Preparation. After-school matters participants with a GPA of 3 to 3.4 enrolled in college at a higher rate than non-participants, and 71% versus 63% for the district in 2006. Additionally, research from the Chapin Hall Center for Children at the University of Chicago found that teens who participate in after-school matter programs have higher graduation rates, lower dropout rates, and fewer course failures than teens who do not participate. Of course, we also face challenges, but we must meet them head-on with innovative thinking and creative solutions. For example, teens who join our core program model, the apprenticeship, receive stipends as financial incentive to participate and as a reinforcement of the structure of the workplace. Since apprenticeships take place in job-like settings, this investment in our youth make it possible for the most economically disadvantaged teens to experience the working world that awaits them after graduation. We know we must do more. Our vision for the next 3 years includes doubling our current number of Tech 37 program slots to 7,000, while tripling our Science 37 program slots to 3,500. However, this ambitious vision is weighed down by fiscal realities. Due to the substantial reductions in government funding and the anticipated reductions in corporate and foundation giving for this fiscal year, our Board of Directors was forced to decrease our budget by 1/3, which is $7.3 million. We have taken significant measures to manage costs and maximize our program offerings, but these measures were unable to prevent the elimination of 1/3 of our total program slots in the coming year. Restoring these 10,000 slots, let alone building additional STEM programming, is impossible without additional support. I would like to make a few recommendations on how the private sector and state and federal stakeholders can take better advantage of nonprofit organizations like After School Matters to improve STEM education. The government must increase its support of informal education, including out-of-school time programming such as After School Matters, giving the increasing evidence of the important role in teaching and reaching America's youth. Understanding that evaluation and reporting is a priority, the government needs to provide additional resources to nonprofits to be able to engage evaluators to assess outcomes of programs. If government grant application and reporting processes were simplified and streamlined, we could add more internal resources to ensure program quality and effectiveness. I encourage the private sector to broaden participants partnerships to maximize investments with nonprofits, focusing on long-term sustainability and a vision that supports existing successful programs. With this kind of support, informal educators could move the cause of STEM learning forward, and no one is better poised to make a difference than us. We have a 20-year history of success with proven program models. We are integrated into the communities we serve, and most importantly, we have access to a diverse, curious, and eager audience who, with the right spark of inspiration, will change not only the course of their own lives, but also the future of our country. On behalf of After School Matters, I am grateful for your time and attention, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Daley. Chair now recognize Mr. Michael Lach.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Eilers, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here to speak with you about this issue. It's an honor to sit before you alongside colleagues who I've worked with and learned much from. I'm the Officer for Teaching and Learning for the Chicago Public Schools. Our school system consists of over 600 schools, nearly 25,000 teachers, and more than 400,000 students. I began my career as a high school science teacher and have played a leadership role in the design and execution of CPS's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education programs for the 5 years. We've made great progress with math and science instruction in Chicago. Student performance has risen considerably over the past 5 years, and the rate of improvement is faster than that of the rest of the state. To do this, we developed a comprehensive plan to coordinate all aspects of math and science improvement. This includes creating a vision for high-quality instruction, building a support infrastructure to provide high-quality, content-rich professional development to thousands of teachers over the course of an academic year, forged partnerships with local businesses, museums, laboratories, and universities to increase content knowledge of our teachers, and enhanced our after-school offerings to include mathematics and science enrichment. We've done this in a challenging context. 85% of our students come from low-income families. Our resources are low. Illinois ranks 47th in the nation in the level of state support for education. Our capacity is limited. Less than 5% of our K-8 teachers possess a state endorsement in mathematics. The Chicago public school system is extremely decentralized. By state code, decisions about local school budgets, curriculum, and principal contracts are made by an elected body called the local school council, not the chief executive officer or the school board. While I feel proud of the accomplishments to date, there's still much work to do. An achievement gap remains in many of our schools. The number of students meeting and exceeding standards remains far too low. Our high schools in particular still have graduation rates that are unacceptable. Improving schools at scale is complicated, time-intensive work, and I'm reminded again and again of the need to approach these challenges with real humility. The gaps we face and the resources have come, and the resources and capacity limitations have been built on 5 key strategies we've used to drive things ahead. The first is teacher quality. We know that teachers need to know the subjects they teach. Part of our systems approach involves using our university colleagues to help us increase the content knowledge of teachers. Much of this work originated with National Science Foundation resources, including the old CUSP grant, which enabled us to provide tuition stipends for teachers to go back to school and learn the mathematics and science they needed to. A second key strategy is to provide course support for classroom instruction. Again, we used our neighbors and our partners. For instance, the University of Chicago on the south side of the city is the Center for Instruction in K-5 Mathematics, again, thanks to pioneering NSF work around curriculum development. At the high school level, we partner with many local and national institutions, including UIC, the Illinois Institute of Technology, Carnegie Mellon University, the Field Museum, to provide coaching, professional development, training, and curriculum support for our teachers. We know that extended learning opportunities are essential. As Mrs. Daley mentioned, enhancing after-school experiences for kids is tremendously important. There's no better astronomy lesson in Chicago than going to the Adler Planetarium and seeing the sky show. There's no better horticulture lesson than going to the Chicago Botanic Gardens and learning to cultivate and grow a garden. We've also been pretty aggressive about creating new schools. Our Renaissance 2010 program involves the painful process of closing down schools and creating new ones. We're proud to have created several math and science focused schools over the course of that time period. We've done this with extensive partnerships throughout all aspects of the city. I'll highlight a few principles that undergird the kinds of partnerships that I think are important. We've been able to do this because of coherence. We've had a comprehensive vision and system of support for several years, and that coherence enables us to help partners organize themselves so their work aligns with ours. Having so many high-quality partners is really, really helpful. It gives us a sort of buyer's advantage when we talk about other work. For instance, there was a local university that wanted to do a wonderful collaboration with arts and science content, but we were able to go to them and say, you know, you really need to explicitly connect this to our curriculum, and they were able to make those kinds of changes. Having catalysts from the federal government has been incredibly powerful. Funding sources and grants enable us to leverage and new resources and create the kind of innovations that we need to move things ahead. Lastly, we've made a lot of progress by centralizing our supports. We find the general public does not understand science and mathematics very well or its practice. Sadly, many of our school administrators share that same lack of understanding. By really providing a coordinated central support, we can drive that kind of work. Too often, children in Chicago are considered disadvantaged because of the many social issues that confront them. Without taking anything away from the situation in which our children grow up, the word disadvantage has always troubled me. Where STEM education is concerned, I believe that growing up in Chicago can and should be considered an advantage. Our students grow up right next door to world-class universities, businesses, museums, and laboratories. These institutions can and should be considered part of the overall system of mathematics and science improvement. And our collective work to date has shown that when such a system is aligned and pointing in the same direction, that system works to serve the students of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lach. I recognize Dr. Donald Wink.
Chairman Lipinski, Ranking Member Eilers, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, please accept my thanks for the opportunity to testify today on the subject of how universities can engage in partnership efforts to address important questions about the systems that will improve K-12 STEM education. I think it is particularly meaningful to testify in the context of the work at the University of Illinois at Chicago. UIC is proud of the work of its faculty, staff, and students as they pursue the same goals of excellence in research, service, teaching, and patient care that are found at other Research One universities with significant health science programs. But at UIC, we also have the ability, the opportunity, and the duty as one of the nation's few urban land-grant institutions to focus important parts of our work on the opportunities and challenges of one of the world's great cities. In this, we acknowledge the importance of the support we receive from foundations, the private sector, the city, the state, and of course the federal government. All are important in establishing priorities for our work, but NSF is especially strong in requiring that our work draw from and often contribute to the research literature itself. Through all of this, we try to address the central need for reforming STEM K-12 education, improving instruction. But improving instruction requires many different parts of the K-12 system to work well and in tandem. This includes K-12 administrative systems that use distributed leadership to support well-assessed learning by all students, school culture, including safety, of course, but also a sense of content rigor, relevance, and inquiry that must be shared by teachers, students, and parents. In addition, teachers need to be skilled in the reflective practice that is a necessary part of the work of any professional, and they need to be given the time and the training to do this. Finally, students must engage and be supported in developing a growth mindset informed by deep inquiry-based interest in science that develops over time. If these are available, then the research literature is clear. Classroom instruction will change and student outcomes will improve. In Chicago, I'm proud to be part of a very large number of individuals committed to making those components a well-orchestrated system for our students in the roles that the university can play. There are several overlapping activities in which UIC faculty, staff, and students support improvement in K-12 STEM education, ranging from teacher education to the ways in which we educate the undergraduates who come to our campus from K-12 systems. I note that within these there is one important gap: how to translate STEM research into K-12 practice. That was why it was so interesting for me to learn about and have the chance to work with Dr. Linda Martin and her colleagues at Foreman High School on the Abbott-supported Science 37 program. This environment will not just engage students. As Abbott has shown, it is also a way to engage STEM experts. We hope that all these different activities will be included in our new NSF-funded Math and Science Partnership Grant, the Chicago Transformation Teacher Institute program. The CTTI, as it is known, will train 160 math or science teachers in cohorts from 20 different schools in current mathematics, physical science, and life and environmental science content. These teachers will also receive workshops on leadership and on the design and implementation of curricula, aimed particularly at creating rigorous AP and capstone courses for 12th grade in schools where previously there were few examples of such offerings. At the same time, these teachers will continue to teach in earlier grades, providing further development of all 4 years of the high school curriculum. As we talk about systems, I think it is meaningful to note that the CTTI, though unique, is also an outgrowth of previous work by the district and with support of NSF, especially the NSF-funded Chicago Urban Systemic Program and the district's comprehensive plan, the Chicago Math and Science Initiative. One outcome of this was the Algebra Initiative, which put the mathematics departments at UIC, DePaul, and the University of Chicago in close support of CPS teachers and led to many ideas for the CTTI. In addition, the CTTI is intimately connected to the work of the Chicago High School Transformation Project, which was funded by the Chicago Board of Education with a significant assist from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The High School Transformation Project further strengthened the relationship of CPS with UIC, IIT, Loyola, and Northwestern in the area of science, and gave us experiences in supporting curricula change that are now brought to bear in the CTTI. Finally, the CTTI is a deep research project addressing how university-based training can affect the elements of school capacity, teacher practice, and student outcomes. I thank you for listening to these remarks, and I welcome the opportunity to answer your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wink. And finally, we have Ms. Katherine Pickus.
Good morning, Chairman Lipinski, Ranking Member Eilers, and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Kathy Pickus, and I am the Divisional Vice President of Global Citizenship and Policy at Abbott, and I'm also the Vice President of the Abbott Fund. As someone who works every day examining how Abbott and the Abbott Fund can make a difference in our communities, I so appreciate the opportunity to be here today to explore with the subcommittee how to meet our country's increasing needs in science education. Science and innovation, especially as they relate to human health, will be key to addressing some of our greatest challenges. At the same time that our workforce needs science, engineering, and technology skills, fewer U.S. students are choosing these studies, let alone professions. As a healthcare company, Abbott is dependent on an increasingly sophisticated workforce of strong skills in science, technology, engineering, and math. We need to develop and encourage the next generation of innovators. Currently, Abbott employs approximately 7,000 scientists worldwide. 78% of these scientists are based here in the United States. The ability to fill these well-paying jobs with people from our own communities would be highly beneficial. As we all know, we're facing many challenges to achieve this goal, including encouraging an interest in science at the educational, career, peer, even the parental levels. You know, I was struck recently when I was having a conversation with a student at Foreman High School. She said she loved science and wanted to be a pediatrician, but she would never share that dream with her friends, not even her parents, because she said, no one would support me. And we need to create a culture for students like the one I spoke of, in which their interest in science is encouraged and validated. That means opportunities beyond the classroom, real-world experience, parents acting as advocates for their children's scientific aspirations, and a scientific community actively engaged with their counterparts in education. At Abbott, we took a hard look at what we could do to advance STEM education and determined that we wanted to develop a portfolio of educational programs that would be built around strong partnerships with existing educational organizations with proven records of success, like After School Matters. They need to be strategic, systemic, and sustainable, and they need to be driven by scientific evidence, results, and measurable outcomes. And we also need them to serve as a catalyst, calling others to action. Our approach to this endeavor goes far beyond financial support. We provide expert consultants experienced in science and education program design, implementation, and evaluation. And we believe that one of the most valuable contributions that we've been making is providing access to our research and development facilities and our scientists who engage one-on-one with students. The research we did indicated that programs that start early and that continue to touch students at various points in their K through 12 education and involve parents have the greatest impact. So at Abbott, we started reaching elementary students and their parents through Abbott Family Science. We also conduct this program in Spanish. And then from there, we continue with Abbott Operation Discovery for middle school students. And then for the high school student in Chicago, we've worked, of course, with After School Matters to create opportunities that are typically not available for public school students. Each of these programs brings students, teachers, scientists together for hands-on, exciting experiences. Building programs around strong community partnerships ensures a lasting impact over time. In Chicago, we're very proud of our partnership with one of the nation's leading after-school initiatives, After School Matters. By investing in an exciting, highly successful program, Abbott has been able to develop a replicable model that provides innovative science education for Chicago area youth. Again, we also want these investments to serve as a catalyst. Our programs are designed to increase the capacity of leading informal science educational institutions, including museums. They engage students, parents, and our own employees, and we're also looking to other private sector corporations, companies to pitch in and join us as well. Abbott Science Education initiatives grounded in strategic alliances and best practices are reaping measurable rewards. Maggie mentioned the lab that we've renovated at Foreman. You know, we didn't do it alone. I want to, offer, our thanks to the Chicago Public Schools, who, when they heard we were renovating a lab where students were in the past doing molecular biology by drawing out their experience with paper and pencil, they joined us to expand the project. Abbott scientists and engineers are participating like never before. I recently met a Harvard-trained scientist who pointed out that this type of community involvement was crucial to his job satisfaction at Abbott. He said that scientists and engineers crave opportunities that allow them to apply their skills and knowledge in a way that can truly make a difference. I also met recently a young African-American woman, a PhD, working as a senior clinical research scientist, who told me that she can't wait for the next chance to get in front of young girls at underserved elementary schools to tell them that you can do it too. And we've seen other evidence that shows that these programs are having a positive impact on student attitudes towards science and science careers. Chairman Lipinski, I agree with you. No single stakeholder can solve this crisis alone, and only through all of us working together can we effectively address this challenge. As you develop policy in support of K-12 science education, we offer our experience as a benchmark, but most importantly, we offer our ongoing commitment and support as you work to advance this important cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pickus. I want to thank all our witnesses for testimony, and now we will move on to the questions. I want to say I'm very pleased to see, especially at this time, our last week, almost our last day before we're going to August recess, to see so many members who are here And I think it really shows the interest not only in STEM ed, I also like to think it shows that Chicago just brings everybody out. So I am going to, as I usually do, use my prerogative as chair. Usually the chair will ask the questions first, but I want to pass it along. I will leave myself to the end. So right now I recognize Ms. Fudge for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here today. Just a couple of questions, actually. I'm going to begin with a question for Dr. Ward. Dr. Ward, in his testimony, Dr. Wink emphasized that there is a need to bring school principals into any STEM efforts so that they can develop an appreciation for the importance of STEM learning in their schools and to provide their teachers with some support to implement reforms. Can you tell me what or if NSF is doing anything or addressing the need to bring principals and other administrators into your major K-12 educational programs?
Congresswoman Fudge, and I would say that we have a long history, in fact, in the engagement of principals in particular, but other administrators, as Dr. Wink described so well in his testimony, even dating back to our formal systemic reform efforts. We recognized that it was critical for the progress, for the success and sustainability of education to engage fully administration, particularly principals, in the shared vision of what was going on, the shared implementation, and the shared accountability of the reform undertaken. We found that this was successfully demonstrated in a number of what we called at that time process and outcome driver approach in our early systemic efforts. And we encouraged administrative support for both process and outcome to look especially at coordination of sets of policies and resources for excellence in STEM education, for the facilitation and support of and commitment from a broad group of stakeholders, which you're hearing fully from the experts here today, that would include parents, industry, informal science institutions, in collaboration and work with the administrators in the various systems. The role that the principals and other administrators play in helping demonstrate the criticality of high expectations for both the teachers and the students to enjoy and to demonstrate proficiency in STEM content, and also the criticality of the support or of acknowledging the support and the importance of data to actually inform the decisions that the administrators would have to make and to track progress towards success. So yes, we have a history there, and we agree with you. It's quite critical to have that component.
Thank you so much. And this is to any member of the panel. The test score gap between minority and majority students is considered one of the most frustrating problems in public education. Experts say that such gaps result from various entrenched factors, often, though, due to socioeconomic factors that can hinder learning inside and outside the classroom. What is being done now to remove the achievement gap in STEM fields, and how could we do a better job to eliminate some of these disparities?
That's a great question. It's an issue that I know is near and dear to the hearts of just about everyone who works for the Chicago Public Schools. In my experience, we have found that there are no silver bullets to closing the achievement gap. There is not a certain test or certain curriculum or certain kind of teacher that enables that. In fact, it's a multitude of supports all working together that we can show will enable students to learn at high levels. And in Chicago and around the country, there are existence proofs that show poor minority kids can and will learn at high levels when all those supports are put in place. Our challenge is to figure out how do we bring those existence proofs to scale. And so our work on creating systems to enable external partners to help us with the delivery of curriculum, our work to create the right kind of accountability tools and metrics to help schools know the right way to go, and then connecting the social services and the families and communities in the school by extending the school day, by more and more after school and Saturday programs all seem to work, but we know we have to have all of those levers be pulled in concert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time has expired, but I would certainly hope if there are other members of the panel who would wish to respond that they might do so to my office or in writing at some point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fudge. The chair now recognizes Dr. Eilers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me just quickly follow up, Mr. Lach, on your last response. What is your dropout rate in Chicago high schools, the overall dropout rate?
There's several different ways to measure it, but it's around 50%, 55%.
50%. Okay. That's not too bad compared to what we face in Detroit. We may want to send our Detroit students to Chicago. More serious questions. Well, first of all, I just want to commend Ms. Pickus on what you're doing about getting scientists and engineers into the schools. And every time I speak to a group of scientists and engineers, I encourage them to go to their nearest school or their children's school and offer to speak and perhaps offer to take the students on a field trip through their labs, or if they're engineers, take them out in the field and show them how bridges are built. And a lot of them get very excited about that. The unfortunate feedback I get at times is that the schools don't want to do it. And that's where I think you play a key role by persuading the schools and doing a lot of the legwork. They don't want to do field trips. There's too much time, too much trouble. There's liability, there's expense. And even allowing someone in the school without having them knowing ahead of time what they're going to say, a lot of them are afraid of that. So thank you and to Abbott for what you're doing, because it's I can assure you, based on my conversations, it's desperately needed to have someone there to make the arrangements and break the ice. Also, Ms. Daley, comment about your statement that most scientists led to science by an early experience. It's also my situation. I don't know whether I would have become a scientist without that, but my sister, when she was in high school, was taking high school chemistry. Popular Science magazine gave free magazines to every student in high school physics or chemistry. She took them home. I read them. I remember doing the home experiments, and I was just astounded that a little boy in a town of 800 people who had never met a scientist and never expected to meet any could sit there and make carbon dioxide and channel it down to a candle flame and make it go out. I didn't realize I was contributing to global climate change by doing that. But nevertheless, it was sort of an aha moment for me. And I think it's very important to generate and encourage those aha moments. Dr. Wink, quick question. For your MSP program, how are the teachers selected? And where does your support come from outside of NSF?
So as to the selection process, and this goes back to the question of principals, we're actually going to be working with schools. And one of the things we'll be doing this fall is working in developing some examples, but then also in dialogue with the schools to produce an application process where as teams of teachers, but also the school administration comes into the program. So we're not looking to work with individual teachers. We will expect that the teachers that are in a team will have a shared commitment, but they'll also have initial training appropriate for being a science teacher in the high schools, and then we'll be looking at what their particular needs are in terms of which of the cohorts that we bring them into. So we will need teachers who are ready to engage and have initial proper training, because this is going to be graduate courses that will go considerably farther. But it's not going to be individuals. It'll be teams that show that the leadership components of the program actually will have some traction within the schools.
Very good. I am sure I've run institutes before in my prior life, and that's the key factor, getting the right people involved. And it sounds like you have a very good approach. Back to you, Mr. Lach. You've emphasized several times the rich resources you have available in Chicago and the use you make of them. How would you advise, or what would you advise schools in smaller school districts further from urban centers? Is there any way you would see that they would be able to substitute for that experience that you're making such good use of?
A couple comments on that. I think there's a lot of local resources in every community. It doesn't have to be something like the Adler Planetarium or the University of Illinois at Chicago. I'm sure there's an awful lot of science that happens in local businesses, in the agricultural industries and whatnot in rural areas that could be leveraged in those sorts of ways. That said, I think there's also the issue of driving capacity in rural areas is a really difficult problem to solve because we depend on our partners in Chicago a great deal. I think something I'd encourage local administrators to consider is ways to leverage some of the national work around curriculum design, around teacher training institutes, around online learning that might be available to their locations. For instance, there are tremendous computer-based programs. We use some of them to do our high school mathematics, which don't have to be invented locally, but can be purchased. Most of them were developed with NSF resources at one point, and that can be used to really drive that kind of work.
Good. I see my time has expired, so thank each and every one of you.
Thank you, Dr. Eilers. Now I'll recognize Mr. Carnahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the panel for being here on this subject. It's one of great interest to me. And I guess I want to start by asking a question that's really been prominent in my hometown in St. Louis. Like a lot of urban school systems, we've had problems. And at the same time, we've had a state board come take over from our elected school board as they try to grapple with changes in the system. There's been this big disconnect between what are really world-class institutions and resources around the area, from universities, corporations, institutions like the St. Louis Science Center, Missouri Botanical Gardens, the Danforth Plant Science Center. The list goes on. So we've got this amazing infrastructure of institutions, but there's this disconnect with the public school system and those resources and those talents and energies being able to somehow be involved and support the public schools, and especially STEM education programs. And they've got some stake in seeing the best and brightest kids get into those fields so they can be a part of those institutions. And I guess I'm really, this is a fundamental question for our community, but I think for a lot around the country. But I guess I'm asking for, how do you bridge that gap? Are there Chicago, other cities that have done this well? And we'd be really interested to learn from them in terms of how best to make those connections and support the schools generally, but also with regard to STEM education.
I can offer some of the some examples of what we've learned in Chicago. We've made plenty of mistakes on the way to do that, but I can tell you what we've learned. First, we found it was really important to have very clear requests from all of our partners. We're the Chicago Public Schools. We need as much help as we can get. I'm not really in a position to tell anybody their help isn't welcome. That said, if I can go to a university and say, you know, I need more help in middle school science than I do K-5 math because U of C's covering K-5 math. That's really helpful. So the first thing we did was, with our strategy, sort of carved out the pieces and made sure each of our players and partners had some ownership over those pieces. The second thing that we've done is we had enough political capital to move things in that direction. This came from several places. The mayor has always been very, very interested in science and mathematics education. In fact, he convenes every year a carnival. We call it Science in the City. It celebrates Chicago as a city of science and organizes all the people who do science and science-related activities together. That helps bring people along. We have a plan that is the center of that, and that pulls things in place. Having resources from external sources is also very, very helpful. At the high school level, we leaned on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. For middle school, we've really focused on resources from the Chicago Community Trust, the largest local foundation. For much of the work around organizing universities, that's come from the National Science Foundation. If there isn't the political will to get the university presidents and deans of education and museum presidents all in the same room, having external resources to sort of grease the skids and make that happen has been really, really useful.
Thank you.
I would add, and fully agree with what Dr. Lach has pointed out, the political will is quite critical. Making the case of the economic competitiveness that a city or a state or a rural area stands to benefit from this kind of coherence and seamlessness throughout the learning continuum, if you will, has served in a number of places as a powerful incentive. You may be familiar, several years ago, the Council on Competitiveness initiated an innovation initiative and talked about clusters of competitiveness, that is, clusters of innovation. And when, you know, the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, for that child to come through and become a productive citizen, either of that hometown area or elsewhere, all of the components that Dr. Lach talked about are quite critical. From the federal level, particularly at the NSF level, the Math and Science Partnership, for example, there's an explicit emphasis on that partnership notion. The awards are made to colleges and universities, but there have to be strong partnerships with that K-12 system and all other relevant stakeholders in those respective communities. And so the notion of synergy, connectivity, integration of the critical components, not only within a system, but I would argue within the entire community that's being served is quite critical. In terms of tools through that program, there's something called the Math and Science Partnership Network, the MSP Net. And it is designed expressly to be an accessible tool not only to MSP PIs, but anyone interested in both the research and implementation that's taking place within the network of MSP activities. And then finally, I would simply add back to Congresswoman's statement about the achievement gap. I would recommend the MSP Net, and we'll make provisions to get copies available to interested members. Just last fall, the Peabody Journal of Education did a special journal issue on the MSP project itself, and it details explicitly all of the data about the achievement gaps that were reduced across the several MSP net sites, and we'll provide that to you before recess. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know that's tomorrow, right?
I was hoping it was today.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carnahan.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just
Yes,
additional
Dr.
point about from the university perspective. The colleges and universities are doing something already that's vital to K-12, and it needs to be linked more tightly to what goes on in STEM education reform, and that's teacher preparation. In my own background, it was actually in the area of teacher preparation that I first started to engage in these questions. And that has to be something that's shared on the campuses between the colleges of education and the departments of mathematics and science. It's an important requirement of NSF funding, but it's also something to pay careful attention to. The universities are creating the teachers, and their role in this process to do it well and to make sure those teachers know not only the STEM content, but also some of the issues associated with educating the children in these particular contexts is absolutely vital.
Thank you, Dr. Wink. And I'll recognize Mr. Nagelbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I think Mr. Lach probably pointed out a much bigger problem than STEM education, and that is the dropout rate in America. And it is it's almost embarrassing that one of the most prosperous countries in the world has some of the highest dropout rates and some of the highest incarceration rates, I think, in relation to that. But that's not the subject of this hearing, but certainly should be something that we should be very concerned about. You know, I hear a lot of folks talk about, you know, in school districts and around the country, difficulty of retaining math and science teachers. There's not, in many school districts, there's not enough math and science teachers. And certainly that's an issue that needs to be addressed. I'm from the business world, and when we used to have a deficiency in our team, we'd go out and recruit the talent that we needed to complete our team. And sometimes that talent cost more to acquire than other skill sets. Has there been discussion in the academic world, K through 12, about if we need more math and science teachers, that we would pay a higher rate to attract and retain the sufficient number of math and science teachers to make sure that we have those folks on board? I'd throw that out to the panel.
I have long been an advocate for paying mathematics and science teachers more. It was not an issue that we could successfully include in the most recent contract negotiations in Chicago, but it's something that I think is particularly important. I do believe that our current Secretary of Education supports that idea as well.
Anybody else want to? Ms. Ward?
Certainly, we appreciate the importance of an adequate salary for teachers doing some of the most important work that takes place in the nation. One particular instance is through our recent NOIS program. There are explicit provisions made such that during this teacher preparation time, existing teachers are paid a stipend, if you will, for the period of time that they are undergoing the training through this program. But the issue that you speak to is far greater than stipends for preparation itself, and it's one that continues to loom large on the national horizon.
So what is your opinion, yes or no? You think we ought to pay more for?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that the consensus of the panel?
Yes, but if I may add something, please?
Yeah.
It's also a question of understanding the opportunities, as Michael said earlier, that really do come from being in an urban setting. So there are pay differentials between CPS and some suburban districts, which hamper the ability of CPS to retain teachers, and that's across the board, but in particular in math and science. And yet it is, in my experience, the case that on the same pay, a teacher will want to teach in Chicago in almost every case. And the reason is because of the excitement and the opportunities that are there. So we need to address that gap. But the other thing that we need is for the teachers to recognize that those opportunities exist. So we commonly work with individuals who may be from a background that is not in the city, and giving them the opportunity to see what really good teaching goes on in the CPS schools in very many cases really turns them on to that opportunity. So including urban education experiences within the training of teachers is an important part to bringing teachers into these higher need environments. They're not going to just come in when they get their bachelor's degree. They need to be trained in those environments as well.
Will the gentleman yield?
I would yield, yes.
Thank you very much. I've been an advocate of a different pay differential for many years, and generally it's ended up being, as Mr. Lach said, when you get to union negotiating, there are very few science and math teachers, and so the negotiators worry much more about the broad body than they do about specific disciplines. I think this is something that has to be addressed in some other way, perhaps through additional stipends from other organizations, which some school districts use. But you're right on, my colleague is right on this point. We live in a country that believes in the free enterprise system. The amount you get paid in your particular job depends on what you could earn elsewhere. And I don't care whether it's teaching or working in an office or something. And it's clear that a typical high school science teacher can get at least $20,000 or $30,000 a year more by going into industry. Why shouldn't the schools meet the competition? I don't think it should be a matter of union contracts. I think it should just be a matter of competition. So, with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I wanted to hopefully in my questions here sort of try to wrap a lot of this together since we're talking about a systems approach and being the engineer I am. I'm sitting here drawing a diagram. Well, started drawing a diagram. But we have, before us, okay, we have NSF, representative of someone with runs an informal education institution, we'll say, we have K through 12 represented here, university, we have industry here. But beyond that, we've talked a little bit about, you also have out there foundations, retired professionals. We've had a hearing earlier this year about also including informal educational institutions. We have museums. We talked here about the aquarium, planetarium. You also have in the Chicago area, in some other places that are fortunate across the country, national labs. And I'm probably leaving out some others. But the question is, I'm looking for what recommendations that you would give. If you were going somewhere else, to another area that had a lot of these similar potential for bringing together so many different pieces, for so many different stakeholders, what would your recommendations be as to how to best try to coordinate? Because we heard stories from each of you about a little bit of the coordination that you have done, especially Mrs. Daley and worked with, in after-school matters, worked with Abbott for some coordination. We've heard some other examples of how that's done. Mr. Lach talked about how Mayor Daley has been important in emphasizing Chicago as a, in science and in technology. But how would you recommend going about making these connections or telling someone else, telling another city, how do you make these connections and make them work to really have a systemic approach to STEM ed, to really better educate our children in STEM education? So just trying to throw that out there, give you a chance to think about and give some recommendations for what you would do and what you would recommend. So Ms. Pickus?
Yeah, I would just like to also say that, that there's some great leadership that has been demonstrated by Mayor and Mrs. Daley. It's unique for the city of Chicago. They have reached out to unusual, atypical partners, and they have brought people together to approach a challenge in a uniform manner. And I think that if we were to take the model that's taken place in Chicago and as an engineer dismantle it as well and find what makes it work, we can share it with other communities. You know, Abbott has facilities all across the United States, all across the world, and what we're trying to do is piece this together. You know, clearly the leadership that they've provided has given us, you know, a great vision to establish the kind of partnerships that we could have in Columbus, Ohio, for example, where we have a very large presence. And we found that by looking at what was going on in Columbus, small siloed activities were already taking place. Our nutrition scientists who are based there were reaching out to their counterparts at the Ohio State University, and they were together going to elementary schools, or they were going to a museum. It's about looking at bringing others in and establishing some order and getting others to, as a group, provide leadership for a long-term vision in this area. So I suggest we look at Chicago and share the model with St. Louis, Columbus, other places around the country.
Ms. Daley?
I would say that I agree with you, Kathy. I think that when I do talk to other cities and mayors, I will say really, in this case, it's really important for the mayor to be dedicated to these things, and it will fall into place. You know, if the mayor gathers all these people around a table and says, "We want to make this work," I mean, it's really a great step in the right, in the right direction. So, in a way, it is executive driven, I think. But then, once you get these people together, then the partnerships develop, and everyone, I think, feels committed to trying to, enhance the whole idea of advancing STEM education. And, you know, one of the reasons that it's businesses is that because the businesses can also see how it will affect the economy of the city. And I think that it really is relatively easy to do once you gather the people together. The partnerships become, like motivated friends, actually, to make it happen.
Thank you. Dr. Ward?
I think the role of dissemination of actually what works, and to be candid, what has not worked, so that one can learn from lessons of previous existence proofs, if you will. We learned quite a lot during the urban systemic program, for example, but there was also the rural systemic program. We now have the math and science partnerships. Documenting very carefully and rigorously, and in terms of accountability, all of the critical components that are necessary to make a systems approach in STEM education effective can't be understated. These networks that we're talking about, the use of technology, for example, so that people have ready access while they're in process of trying to mount these kinds of activities. From the federal level, we do whatever we can in terms of outreach and making available those best practices and dissemination. We're talking with the Department of Education now, as they're about to distribute quite a lot of ERA money to work together such that best practices that NSF has supported over the past several decades can be immediately made available to communities. And that discussion is going quite well. We have a workshop coming up, I think within a month's time, for example, for those kinds of things. But recalling what Dr. Wink had said in his written testimony, I was very struck by that. This is not easy. It's not quite as easy as it takes a long-term mounting of trust and relationships among the critical players, the appreciation of rigor and high expectations, the needed infrastructure in place, not only just the physical infrastructure, but financial resources in place, the necessary policies being aligned well, standards standards-based instruction being aligned well so that you can see the necessary student attainment in the STEM fields that are so desired.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I would like to comment. We're talking actually about two very important things. And one is changing and enhancing what's happening during the school day. But I would also, because of course I'm naturally involved in the out-of-school activities, I think at the same time we have to consider the importance of that, just as Dr. Eilers was saying, where often is that spark? We want to have more scientists and engineers in the future of our country. And if in fact it does seem that quite a few of them develop that interest in and out of school activity, I think that that's something that we should pursue and think about, because it's actually easier to do. It's important to work on the system and continue to do that, but to make impact in out of school is relatively easy to do, and also is very cost effective. It is not nearly as expensive as the traditional school day. So I just think that that should definitely be a priority as well.
Dr. Eilers?
Thank the gentleman for yielding. I just wanted to comment on that experience I had in the past few weeks. I learned to fly many years ago and then gave it up because of a number of reasons, and I've gotten back into it recently. But I met a teacher in Grand Rapids who was a high school teacher, and he hadn't learned to fly at one point. He was hoping to become an airline pilot and return to the Bahamas, where he was from, and run tours. He never quite managed to do that. But he decided that a good way to get the kids excited, elementary school kids, excited about math and science, was to have them study aviation. And so he volunteered to teach them after school and has them build model airplanes. I met him at an event where a chapter of the Experimental Aviation Association, which I'm a member, was meeting. We invited him in, gave the kids rides in real airplanes. It's amazing. I would predict that more of those kids would go into math and science as a result of that simple experience than would have for almost any other experience it could have given them in the school. They love airplanes, they love to build their own now, and so forth. So I think there are endless opportunities to use that after school time to really develop kids' interest in math and science and careers in those fields, other than just the standard things that we've been doing in the past. Thank you.
Anyone else on the panel want to add anything here?
One last quick comment. You're talking about during school education and then after school and how they relate. One of the things that we saw with regard to After School Matters was the investment that we've made in the facility at one high school actually impacted the science courses for during school, the active hours for in school, and the leveraging those investments, and also with regard to attracting teachers. I think teachers look, and the teachers that we're working with at Lindblom High School in Chicago and Foreman High School, their opportunity to reach and do more work in an after-school environment, I think also encourages them to become more engaged in the Chicago Public City school system, and also engages them with the students long term.
I certainly think, and we all know everything feeds off each other in all these, and I certainly know that's was the case in my life, in my education, in growing up, and it was very significant to be in Chicago and have the opportunities that I had, and I've talked about this many times, going to the Museum of Science and Industry, Shedd Aquarium, the Abbott Planetarium, Brookfield Zoo, and all those things, especially that really played into, and it got me more and more interested in eventually getting a degree in engineering. But I want to thank you for all your work. Mrs. Daley?
I actually have one little anecdote that I'd like to share. One time when we were doing a robotics program in a school that was having difficulties and was it wasn't one of our more successful high schools, but it was, always these teenagers are wonderful. And I was observing a Tech 37 program which was dealing with robotics. And what happened is I noticed a gentleman was there observing these kids, and he came over to me and he said, Mrs. Daley, you saw 25 teenagers very much engaged in building robotics. They actually were walking on the tables and on the floor, and they were all having a wonderful, joyous experience in this learning. And he came over to me and he said, I have to tell you this. I've been teaching in this school for 25 years. I'm a math teacher. And he said, sometimes I would get a little down thinking that these young people really just don't care. They're not interested. And he said, after watching this afternoon, he said, I realize that I need to change the way I teach. So that was an aha moment for him, I think. And so I think that working together out of school and in school and getting all of us, to realize the potential of our teenagers, even in the schools that are failing, the potential is great. So we have to create these activities that allow these youngsters to show their possibilities.
And it points out that it's not just the kids, the students who learn. We all learn as we go along and learn how to do this better and actually get some reinforcement out of doing these things with these kids. So, and I just want to thank you for the work that you do. I want to thank all of our witnesses today for their testimony. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from the members and for answers to any follow-up questions the committee may ask of the witnesses. And with that, the witnesses are excused and the hearing is now adjourned.